Well, hello there. This is Cody, the author that you know. Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm 6 minutes late for this live stream. Excuse me. And I also want to do this like once a week. And I was gonna do it last week around Thursday, which was a week from the last time I did it. But I was so close to finishing Mark Raskovich's Falkenhorst that I figured, well, I'll be doing a review once I finish this book, so I might as well just wait till I'm done with the book. And that is the slippery slope. Sorry, I suddenly have way too much saliva, which is one of the uh, symptoms of my ailment. So I wanted to finish that book, get the review done, and then do a live. And so I'm saying that's the slippery slope in which that trying to do something every week turns into every other week, turns into, well, maybe 3 weeks, and then months have gone by and you haven't gone live in a while. So anyway, my intro, I think I said it already. My name is Cody Engdahl, Cody C. Engdahl. I'm the author you know. I'm the author of 6 novels. 5 right now are available. The 6th one will be out. The French Fiasco, that will be out April the 16th, the day after tax day if you're in America. So that way you can spend your big fat tax return check on, well, you spend a few bucks on me maybe. So let's get to it. So the 3 things I want to talk about today, while I sip my coffee, I just microwaved it, so it's a little hot. Is first of all, I want to do the review, and then we'll talk about. We got interrupted last time that I was live. I'm going to do the. Brian Riley says you are so back. If I can get that to pop up, everything's a nightmare. There, there it is. Yes, I am so back. Yeah, I'm sorry. I left in quite a hurry last time I was live because the one thing I have learned is that when the doctor calls to answer the phone, especially with my phone, if you try to call me, what happens is it automatically it automatically goes to voicemail. It doesn't even ring, and then I have a message going out saying, "Hey, call me back," because a lot of times it just goes to voicemail and it doesn't ring. But if you call back immediately afterwards, it does. Yes, I'm sure. I've had a million experts. I've looked it up. I've had people tell me, "Oh, do this or do this or this." There's nothing in the settings I can find to make it stop. So I'm still working on that. But anyway, I have learned that when they call to answer, because as a lot of you know, I have cancer now and I'm going through treatment, and so I have a lot of just pop up, like I have very little say in when my appointments are scheduled. I just have to show up and be available when they need me to. And thankfully, my work and my schedule mostly allows me to do that. So, all right, so we're going to talk about Falkenhorst, which is the novel. It's a Franco-Prussian War novel written by Mark Rascovich. Just finished reading that. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. And so we'll do the review. Then I'm going to go kind of finish what I started last week, or really more to give you an update. So I am now in the editing phase of the French Fiasco, and so I'm in the midst of editing. So I think those of you who are authors, I know there's at least 2 watching right now, that uh, this is well, I mean, the whole reason why I decided to have this channel is to really kind of just share my experience as an author, and not to be like an expert, like I am an expert, pay me money so I coach you, nothing like that. There's plenty of guys out there, and some of them are probably worth the money. But just, hey, I'm on the path. You may be on the path too. I'm out there making mistakes. I'm out there having successes. Here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'm learning from it. And I think that's worthwhile. And then the third thing is yes, if you did not know, I have throat cancer. Well, I don't know if it's throat cancer. I'm going to ask that when I go back in. More precisely, there's a cancerous tumor that is in the lower left base of my tongue, and that's the reason why I sound the way I do right now. I'm slurring my speech. It's probably the reason why I've been losing weight because it's difficult to eat, difficult to swallow. So we're gonna get into that too because I know people want to know about that. But I'm not gonna bore that you to death with that right now. I save it to the end. So let's get on with it. So Falkenhorst. First of all, let's see. Oh, I just screwed this up. I had it all set and then I hit the wrong thing and then everything goes away. All right, we're gonna do sit tired. Yes. Uh, first of all, I've my opinions and the way I go about doing things is constantly evolving, right? So when I started writing my Civil War trilogy, I, I believe that an author, if you're very serious about your author career and being a good author and writing books that people actually really want to read, then you should also be a reader. And in fact, I think all of us at some point were readers first. Even there, some of the authors who are say, "Oh, I'm too busy. I don't read novels anymore." Well, you should be doing something else then, if that's the case. I think reading novels, contemporary classics, whatever, within your genre, outside of your genre. If you're not doing that, you're not growing. You're not going to get any better. You're just kind of trapped inside your own silo. That's my personal opinion. You have time. Uh, Everybody has time. You can make time. I'm sure there's something completely useless that you do that you can put aside. And my rule is just 20 minutes a day. Now, sometimes I read for hours, but I make myself sit down, I put a timer on, and I read 20 minutes a day. I tried to read within my genre. Oh, and here's the thing. Here's where I've evolved, in my opinion. It's not really an opinion. It was just kind of a modus operandi. Is that right? Apparandus. I don't know. I can't speak Latin. Anyway, can't speak English either. Uh, I when I wrote my American Civil War novels, I was reading novels, and I was reading novels that were around that time, but I stayed away from the American Civil War because I didn't want that to pollute my right, not to pollute, but to infect it. I didn't want to feel like I was copying other people or anything like that. And so I wrote the whole trilogy that way. I was reading, of course, non-fictional. I do a lot of research as I'm writing, actually. So non-fictional accounts and like when I got to the Franco-Prussian War, I decided that I kind of put that aside, especially since the Franco-Prussian War has a very small canon, which is both delightful and scary because it means, well, there's not a lot of competition for me when my book comes out, but at the same time, uh, there's not a lot of competition because there's not a lot of demand. And if you look at the top like historical military novels in the top 100, there's no Franco-Prussian War there. As I always say, if you want to make it in this genre, it's Romans, Vikings, and Nazis. And the Franco, the Germans with their spiked helmets of the Franco-Prussian War aren't quite Nazi enough. So anyway, I changed my tune, and I decided that while I was writing the book, I was going to read as many novels. I mean, I was still reading all the serious non-fictional historical accounts, first-hand accounts, well-written histories of the war. But I also wanted to read a lot of novels are set in it, and I read like Emily Zola's The Debacle was written in 1892. I read Robert Brightwell's book called The Assignment Paris. He wrote that. I think it came out in the early 2010s. I met Robert in one of the Facebook groups that's about the Franco-Prussian War. I read The Young Frontiers. I can't remember the author, but that was written in the 1870s, 1880s, I think. Not a lot of contemporary books about the Franco-Prussian War. This one that I read was was written in 1974, and it's by this man named Mark Rascovich. And I don't believe it's in print anymore. You can't get it on Kindle, but it uh, well, sadly enough, and I felt this kind of ironic, and not to get too doom and gloomy. Oh, by the way, just in case there are people that aren't able to hang in for the whole thing, I just want you to know that I am not dying. The cancer that I have is absolutely treatable, and we're going to treat it, and I'm hoping to start recovering in the spring. Let me see if my share screen is working. Yes. So if I move this aside, okay. Yeah. Okay. I just want to be able to see that I am affecting something. So there's gonna be I'm just gonna have a little sliver over here so I can see what I'm doing. I have to do it this way because for some reason StreamYards doesn't like a lot of the stuff that's on my Mac, and so I'm sharing the whole screen so I can get into things. So, uh, interesting thing about Mark Rascovich, he was a World War II pilot, an American pilot. He was born in Europe and grew up there quite a bit, then came to the United States. Was a World War II pilot. I think he flew a lot of missions in Africa, a lot of reconnaissance missions. And he wrote some contemporary um, thrillers. And by contemporary, I mean like he was mostly writing in the 60s and the 70s. He's got, there's a movie made from one of his novels called The Bradford Incident. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. Let me know if you have. Yeah. Elmore Lloyd Jr. says, let me pull this out straight here. Says that cover cries the 70s. Yeah, and I so what I want to say is that it's a book written in the 70s, uh, with a cover that looks like that, and I was most of the novels I read about the Franco-Prussian War were written in the 19th century, and so and with a very heavy 19th century style, right? Like the 1870s and the 1880s and 90s. I think I read. Did I read 3 books written in that era? And then Robert Brightwell, who wrote in like the you know early 2010s, which was a much more um, modern novel. That one was good too. I reviewed that. You can check that in my reviews. That one was about a British correspondent, very much on the French side of things. But I gotta say that I actually really, really enjoyed this book. It's Mark, a surprisingly good novel, and I think that it would make a great movie. And I like that it was written mostly from the German perspective, which is my book is actually written kind of from both sides, and you'll see if you end up reading it. And by the way, real quick advertisement here. The French Fiasco is going to be $4.99 for the Kindle version. I don't know how much the print versions are going to be because I have to format them first to find out what the production cost is going to be to make each book. So I don't have that price yet. But if you're a Kindle reader, they'll be $4.99 when it comes out. But right now, it's on a special for a pre-order. So pre-order, all that means is that you're saying I want to buy this. When it comes out, it's delivered to your Kindle, and the money is withdrawn. I'm setting the pre-order for 99 cents in the U.S., 89 cents in the U.K., and whatever the equivalent is all over the world. Whether you're in Japan, Australia, Mexico, the deal is there for everybody. Why don't I do that during the 99-cent promos? Because I'm not able to do it the way the whole Kindle thing is set up. But I can do it with the pre-order. So pre-order is going to be very cheap. Why do I do it? Because I want to build up as much momentum as I can for the book. And asking people to pay full price up front before the book is out, I don't think is fair. So the deal is I'm going to give you this book for a lot cheaper than what it's going to sell for if you agree to pay, it's not even you're paying for it now. You're just saying that you're going to buy it. So do me a favor if you're interested. Get the pre-order. I know Lloyd has already done it. I'm sure some of you have as well. The pre-orders are coming along just fine. And then it'll be out April 16th. or maybe sooner. Hopefully. All right. So here is my review. Okay. Um, and this, by the way, is on my blog, which is on WordPress. You can find me there, Cody Siangs. All my blog posts are there. Book review: Falkenhorst by Mark Rascovich. The book is about two young aristocrats forced into an arranged marriage that neither wants. They're both bullheaded, set in their ways, and selfish, but still likable. The wedding takes place on the eve of the Franco-Prussian War, which will test them dearly. Gustav immediately hearkens the call to duty, leaving his bride behind on their wedding night so he can find glory in the battlefield. Teresa is sent to his family's ruined estate on the Prussian-Polish border, but instead of despairing, she grows in her independence as she strives to build it into a viable farm in his absence. There are plenty of action and battle scenes as Gustav and his brother Albrecht, a civil railroad inspector, have their adventures in the war. The boys couldn't be more different from each other, or more different. Gustav is militant and exacting. Albrecht is sensitive and intellectual. The two will eventually become romantic rivals as the story thickens. There are compelling human characters full of contrast and depth. Two of my favorites are the obese, deposed Prince of Hanover, who others call the royal pudding, but turns out to be courageous and noble, and the effeminate and diminutive French lieutenant, others called l'enfant terrible. I can't speak French. The terrible infant, um, because of his ferocity and bravery. The depictions of the battles are vivid, with a deep understanding of Prussian military and aristocracy. I enjoyed this book much more than I thought I would. Sadly, the author, Mark Rascovich, died the same year this was published. I think he should be proud of leaving behind such a engrossing swan song. There is no Kindle version of this novel that I'm aware of, but the link is here. Um, the link here, but here's a link to where you can find a print copy. And then, God, I used to be able to read teleprompter. I can't even read my own writing anymore. And then, of course, there's always, here's a link to my book. So, couple things I want to add to that review. One is, if I haven't said I'm not dying, right? But there is a weird thing that when you have cancer, you become aware of your own mortality a lot more than normal. And when I found out that Mark, and I can't remember what he died of, I had a clipping from a New York Times obituary from him in 1976. I don't think they said what he died of. I know he was 56. I'm 50. I'm about to be 54. I'll be 54 next week. So he's right around my age, and he suddenly dies, and this is his last book. And while I'm reading this and I'm aware of this, I'm also editing my book, which is going to be kind of a capstone for my series. And by that, I mean it's book 6, and it's going to resolve a lot of the things, a lot of the threads that I have started throughout the entire series, including the Civil War trilogy, Mexico, My Love, and The Prussian Prince. So if this were my last book, it would be it would be a worthy last book, because it basically encapsulate everything. All the 5 novels that I've written already. It kind of brings all that to I think, a very satisfying conclusion, and we tie up all the loose ends. There's still a few out there that we will get to, but and then, of course, and real quick, what's going to happen after that is I'm writing a prequel novella that's free and exclusive to my email list. So please get on my email list. That's the very next thing I'm going to do once I publish the French Fiasco. And then we're going to do Black James, which is going to be a epic character novel about the pirate Black James, who you may have encountered when you read um, Massacre My Love. And then we're gonna unseal the overall story and come back to Carl and start new adventures with him. And there's going to be, I think, 4 more books with Carl in it that I have planned. Include, well, I don't want to go too far with that. All right, so that's number one. The other thing is that I really liked this book. It was engrossing. The characters were fantastic. The You could tell that Mark. I know that he had lived overseas and he fought against the Germans. But he had a thorough understanding about how German aristocracy worked. He had a thorough understanding of the German military at the time and the French military. His depictions of characters like the American general Phil Sheridan, who was embedded with the Prussians, it was spot on. By the way, Phil Sheridan is not only in my book, the Prussian. I'm sorry, he's in the French Fiasco, but he's also in uh, the Perils of Perryville, because he was temporarily the colonel of the Second Michigan Cavalry. So he's in Phil Sheridan's in 2 of my books. I liked some of the characters that I thought were like surprises, or like characters that don't fit the mold. So 2 of them were the Crown Prince of Hanover. Now, at the time of the Franco-Prussian War, Hanover had ceased to be a kingdom. I think, I believe, I can't remember if Hanover had allied with the Austrians during the Austro-Prussian War. But Hanover, at the end of the Austro-Prussian War, ceased to be a kingdom and was absorbed into Prussia. And because of that, this man would have been king. I don't know if his father was still alive, but but that was stripped of him. And he's this big fat guy, and no one really takes him serious. I mean, they respect his title, but they think of him as kind of a just in a way, and just one of those political generals who is just there to give them something to do, but just be quiet and let the grown-ups speak. But he actually is the one at the Battle of Vionville to like see through like the chaos and come up with like actual actionable plans when the other generals are just trying to chasing their tails around and trying to figure out. And he's also very noble, and he's aware that people don't take him serious, but he's unconcerned about it too. He's got that kind of royal flippancy where he's kind of above it all, and yet he's looked down upon, but yet they all give him a certain amount of respect. And he turns out to be a very noble character, and a very likable character, and has a really good ending. I don't know how much of this is true based on. I'll have to look it up actually, because he's a character who makes it all the way to the end. I don't want to spoil too much, but I like how his story ends. It's very good. The other one is, Mark, like me, doesn't write about like good guys and bad guys when it comes to wars. It's just 2 sides that have people that are good, people are bad, and they have both sides of cowards and heroes and all that kind of stuff. There's a character. It was a 2nd lieutenant. I can't remember what the rank is, but in the American system, he would have been a 2nd lieutenant on the French side. And when the French are all wallowing and no one wants to take charge, this fiery, effeminate, scrawny kid is barking at like generals and taking control of things, and he's ferocious. And his men, because everybody in his regiment has been killed, I mean, all the officers have. He's the last living officer, and the men just adore him and say, "Hey." And he tells me, like, if you don't want follow me, that's your choice. He's like, no, you're our officer, and they call him the the enfant terrible, the terrible infant or the terrible child, because he's got this really high pitched feminine voice, but he's screaming orders and defiance, and he's great. He's great, and it becomes kind of like an arch rival of Gustav, which is the Falkenhorst brother. That's the one that's the real militant one that wants to be a hero, but yet there's kind of a mutual respect between the two. They're both kind of in the same place. They're both young men in the service at the very bottom of the officer rank, and both of them are more heroic than the men that are around them. So I thought that was really good. Those two like unlikely heroes, the effeminate thin French officer and the big fat prince everybody thinks is useless. Both of them turn out to be uh, either more courageous or more noble or more intelligent than anybody around them. So I thought that was wonderful. Uh, I thought that the characters of the young woman Tessa and Gustav were really interesting because parts of them were really likable, but parts of them they were both kind of selfish. And like in the beginning, you sympathize a lot with her because she's being pushed into a wedding that she doesn't want, but yet she also resists any kind of effort that Gustav tries to make on their wedding to bridge the gap between them. And so the whole thing wraps up pretty well, and I ended up liking it more than I thought I would. It's probably my favorite book that I read, novel in the Franco-Prussian War, outside of my own. What's interesting is I've read, I think, 3 or 4 Franco. Let's see, I read the Debacle. I read the Young Frontiers. I've read 4 novels that are not mine about the Franco-Prussian War, and I feel like, first of all, mine's the best. Mine will be the 5th. But what's fun is that having read those 4 novels, I feel like all 5 of our novels fit. Like in my mind, all 5 of our novels happened in the Franco-Prussian War. Meaning, while my characters are doing the things that they're doing, Mark Rascovich's characters are also doing the things that he says, and Robert Brightwell's characters are doing what he said, and Alan Zola's characters are doing what he said. In fact, there's a scene that Emily wrote that excuse me, that I wanted to write the same scene but flip it over. He writes it from the French side. I wanted to write it from the German side. I ended up not doing that because his scene takes place in the Battle of Braziers, where mine, for the scene, I do the Battle of Braziers, but I put the scene that I'm talking about in Fabrach. And basically, it's a scene where a French civilian who is caught fighting is executed by firing squad while his wife pleads for his life. And Zola writes that from the French perspective, and it's a very heartbreaking scene. I flipped it around, took that scene, moved it somewhere else, added a baby to it, but wrote it from the Prussian perspective. Uh, More so from Carl's perspective, who was in at that during the time of that scene, he's in the Prussian military as they're going to shoot this man. And I addressed this a little bit in the forward of my book, and we're going to move on now. So new topic we're talking about editing the Prussian Prince. I'm sorry, not the Prussian. I keep saying that. We're not the Prussian Prince, the French fiasco. So this is one of those military questions of ethics and morals and practicality, and that is the how to treat non-uniformed combatants, otherwise known by Geneva Convention, illegal combatants. And what that means is that when you go to war, especially when you're occupying another country, that people caught fighting who are not in uniform are illegal combatants. And a lot of times in a lot of wars, those people are summarily executed, which seems very harsh. And it also seems like, well, if your country is being invaded, you have the right to defend your homeland, right? And a lot of people, I mean, that sounds logical, right? A lot of people can nod their head and say, yeah, if the Russians, what was that movie, Red Dawn? Russians come to Colorado. The kids are in their blue jeans shooting. I think they're actually Cuban soldiers. I can't remember, but shooting Russians. Um, uh, the problem is that the Geneva Convention also requires that occupying armies have a responsibility um, for the safety of civilians and non-combatants. So they are is upon them to not attack civilians, right? Of course, we're seeing those lines blurred quite a bit these days. But so if the invading army is doing that, and that means that a civilian in plain clothes can hide amongst the civilian population, and then go, you know, uh, create an ambush and kill enemy soldiers, and then immediately disappear back into the crowd. So the Prussians were pretty, they're very German. So they're like, they were paying for all their requisitions, they were protecting civilians, but they were also like, if we catch any civilian, the Frontiers, which is the name of the French resistant fighters, partisan fighters, we catch any civilian armed or in the act of fighting us, we will summarily execute them. Who's right or who's wrong? I mean, you could say, well, you have the right to defend your country, sure, but then you can also say, well, it's murder if you are pretending to be a non-combatant and then using that privilege that the enemy is giving you to then murder them, and that's murder. So who's right or who's wrong? I'm not making that decision, and I certainly don't make that call in my book. I just don't think I'm qualified for that, to tell you the truth. And I think either way, if I were a civilian and my country is being invaded by an enemy, that I would probably want to fight them and hide amongst some civilian masses. And I think that if I was an invading army, and we had bushwhackers, civilians, people dressed in plain clothes sneaking up on our soldiers and killing them, well, I think that the retribution that I would incur or that I would met out would be severe. So let me put this into perspective, okay? Uh, like the Vietnam War, and of course, all the wars that we've been in have been very controversial. But there was so many times where like the Viet Cong would do this. They would, like a woman would come up with a baby and say, "Please help my baby," and she'd hand it to an American soldier and then walk away, and it's a bomb. We've seen this in the Middle East. Suicide bombers getting up close to our military and then blowing themselves up or whatever, or even doing ambushes. So, what is right and what is wrong? What's the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? I'm not saying I know. I'm just saying that it's a matter of perspective, and I think either situation you have to decide what's right and what's wrong for you. And like I said, I think that I would I could see it both ways. So I won't dig my hole any deeper with that one. Uh, so anyway, let's get on with this. Let's go back to sharing my screen. This is the only way I can do it. I have to share the whole screen to make this work. And I am in the midst of editing um, the French fiasco. I'll tell you one of the reasons why I have such a hard time saying French fiasco, not the Prussian Prince, is because originally the Prussian Prince and the French fiasco was all going to be one book. It was going to be one book, and I had a lot of ideas in it. And when I started writing it, I realized I had way too much to get through and way too much that had to happen, and too many good endings along the way. And I realized that I had really two books, so I broke it in two. So the first book is the Prussian Prince, and the second book is the French fiasco. Okay, let's see if these come up here. Yay, they come up here. Those are topics I want to talk to Laura about. There we go. Here, So there are many there's many steps I take in editing my novels once I get done with them. And that's before I even hand them off to my editors, which is Laura and them is my mother. So some of these have already been taken off the list. So I'll tell you the very first thing I did is once I finished writing the book, like like the story was over. I've written all the way through like the chapter 37, which is really the epilogue. There's a prologue and an epilogue, but because of marketing reasons, I don't call them that. I just call it chapter. The prologue. Chapter 1 is the prologue. It was chapter 1, and then it says part 1, chapter 2, and then you go all the way through the 5 parts, and then there's le denouement, and then chapter 37 is like outside of part 5. That makes any sense. It'll make sense to me. Um, so the first thing I did when I finished writing was I dropped the Prussian prints from $4.99 to $3.99 um, for the Kindle, and then I had to build the book, the French fiasco. So I had the master document. I had the historical note in a separate place. Well, actually, I had to finish the historical note. So I finished the book. Then I finished the historical note. I write the historical note as I write the novel. Basically, if there's any kind of historical aspect in the novel that I want to clarify or talk a bit more about, I put it in the historical note. And I do that as I go along. So once I finished the narrative, I then went and finished up the historical note, cleaned up the sources, finished the sources, finished the acknowledgments, cleaned up the glossary, got everything, all the different parts all ready to go. And then I constructed the master document. And so it made the whole book one big pages. That's the software I'm using on my Mac document to work with. And this is the master that I'm going to use to build the digital version. By the way, there is a version right now that KDP has that's a placeholder. So if I die, and you've already paid for the book, you're still going to get it. It just might not be as edited as it needs to be. And every time I get through one full phase of editing, I upload the newest version of it. So that it gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner as we get to the date. But if something happens, there's something there that everybody will get. And right now, the whole book is there. And hopefully it'll be cleaner. It'll be immaculate by the time we get there. So once I do that, I construct the whole thing. There's a lot of marketing things that I do that I won't get into right now. And then I do what's called the first read through. And in fact, I finished that read through Sunday. So we're going to go ahead and mark that off the list. So I just click that, it's going to go away. Bam. All right. I need to work on the cover. Then what I'm doing is I've broken the book up into 7 parts. Well, let me just tell you what I used to do is let me come back here. I'm going to come back on full here. What I used to do is I used to go through the entire editing process, my own editing process for the whole thing. And once I get the whole book done, as far as I could do by myself, with the help of Grammarly and spell check and having Siri read it out loud to me and all those things that I do, and we'll talk about that. Then I give it to Laura. She prints it up, and then takes a red pen to it. But it takes her a few weeks to do it, and it's a lot of waiting around. Once, as Laura goes, she'll feed me pages that she's corrected, and then as I get them, I correct the main document. And then finally, when I'm done with her corrections, then I send that entire completed version to my mother. And then my cat's here, my mother will then go through it. My mother, by the way, television producer. She got her degree in creative writing from Eastern Michigan University. She's a great writer in her own right. And Laura herself, Laura's got a master's from Vanderbilt. She's a published a published scientist. She's got credits in multiple publications that have been published in major scientific journals. So, and actually Laura's better with grammar and has a better. I'm the artsy one. She's the scientific one. So she's got a better eye for detail. She catches things I can't catch. So anyway, there was a lot of waiting around, and I thought that was unnecessary. So I've decided to do this a little different, to stagger it. What I decided to do was break the book up into 7 segments. So the first segment is called opening material, and it's from the title page through the copyright, the table of contents, the preface, the epithet, and chapter 1. So I put that through my paces, and once it's done through my paces, I send it to Laura, and then I start on part 1. And then once Laura gets done with the opening material, and I made those corrections, then I'll send that to my mother, and then she'll do a Passover as well. And then when she gets done with her corrections, then I'll make her corrections, right? Meanwhile, I'm on part 1. When I get to part 1, send to Laura. You see what I'm saying? So that I'm constantly, all 7 segments are going to be, to make it through the circle of the 3 of us until all 7 segments. The reason I'm not using the word part, because I actually use the word part to break up my book as well. My book is actually 5 parts and then a denouement. And the closing segment is the denouement, which has chapter 37, which is really the epilogue. And then the historical note and the acknowledgments and the glossary and the sources, and then finally the other works by Cody Cienko. So anyway, I feel like that way makes the most of our time and it's the most efficient. And then hopefully all of this is done well before the date. The publication date is April 16th, but Amazon demands that I get the book in like a week before or something like that, so that they can approve it and go over it and make sure that it's okay before they allow it to be sold on their platform. And then that's it. And then at some point, once I have a clean manuscript, I will build the print versions. There'll be an Audible version, a Kindle version, a paperback, and a hardcover, all available. And then we'll start with the next one. So right now, where it stands is that Laura has the opening material. I have started my paces on part 1. So what do I do when I forgot. Before I even start the serious editing, I do one read through, and that is just read through the whole book, maybe make some minor changes along the way, but nothing heavy. I'm just reading it to make sure that I didn't miss anything, there's not any open ends, and to see if the flow of it works well. Because you kind of lose a sense of that when it takes you, I think, 8 to 9 months to write the manuscript that someone's probably going to read in under a month. So I read it in about a week after I've spent about 9 months writing it, just to get the flow of it. And then I started working on the segments. So now I'm on part 1, and I wrote each part to be like a novelette. Each part is anywhere between 12,000 to 24,000 words, with anywhere between 6 chapters to like 10 chapters, something like that. So each part is like a mini novel into itself. It has its own kind of arc. It has its own climax that kind of then, and a denouement that leads into the next part. And so, which I thought was an interesting way of breaking up the story and practice, because the next project I'm going to write is not a novelette, but a novella. And what's the difference? Well, we'll get into that a little later, but maybe not today. But I do want to talk about that, the different sizes of fiction that you can write, whether within a novel or as independent pieces themselves. So So my process is in the editing is that once I've done the I mean the initial read through, I've done writing, do initial read through, and I start the editing in earnest. Um, I read through it again, except this time a lot more carefully, making heavier corrections. A lot of breaking down complicated sentence structures, clunky language, omitting a lot of unnecessary adjectives and adverbs, simplifying things, taking unnecessary things out, adding things in for clarity, all that kind of stuff. Once I've done that, well, before I do that, I run it through a spell checker. Then I read through it very carefully. Then I have Siri read through it. So on my Mac, if you take your cursor and you put it on a place and you hit Option and Escape, it will read the passage out loud to you, like in that Siri voice. And having someone else read it out loud will make you hear um, mistakes that your eyes are covering up if you read it yourself. So I put it through that. That really helps. And I catch a lot of problems when I do that. Then when I'm done with that, I copy and I paste the whole thing into Grammarly. Grammarly won't run on my pages, and I'm actually glad it doesn't because separating, if I have Grammarly correcting me as I write, it's distracting. So I'd rather copy and paste it into Grammarly and then look at what Grammarly is telling me is a problem and then deciding whether I want to fix it or not. Then once I do that, I'm pretty happy that that's clean, and then I send it to Laura, and I go on to the next part. So that's where we are right now. I'm just the opening sequence or material has been. I'm done with my major editing with that. Laura has it now. Now I'm working on part one. So overall, I would like to say that I'm very happy with this book. I'm very proud of it. I think my writing technically is better with each book. I feel like this book takes care of a lot of open threads from not only the trilogy but from Mexico My Love. This is no spoiler at all. Uh, the French fiasco starts with Pierre. So if you read Mexico My Love and you remember Pierre, Pierre is the beginning of this book, and he plays a major role. He's one of the main characters in this book. So I think you'll find that if you're a fan of my work and you've read that book and you liked it, I think you'll be very happy with this book. As is Claudette. Claudette's in the book, Carl's mother. There's a few other cameos, some old names, old faces that you may remember from the other stuff. Okay, so let's move on to the last thing. So the cancer. So as I said in the beginning, and this is no secret, I've decided not to. It, this is a very nuanced thing. It's not a secret, right? Like I'm not hiding it from anybody. That's not my intention. So if you know about it, you're free to talk about it to other people. You can ask me about it. You can say things about it when you post to me, all that stuff. That's fine. What I didn't want to do was to go onto Facebook. And I understand the people who do this, and I'm not knocking you at all. But I didn't want to be like, hey, everybody, I got cancer. I could you really use your prayers, all that stuff. For me, that felt weird. So I didn't want to do it that way. I first announced it here. I mean, when I found out, the first person I called was Laura. I was in the doctor's office, and he said, "Yeah, we're pretty sure you have cancer. Hang on a second. We have to go do something. We'll be right back." So when I sat in the examination room with the news that I have cancer, I immediately called Laura, told her, and then they came back and I got the phone. And then right after that, I told my parents, my sisters, my siblings, basically, my parents, my sisters, that I had cancer. And then I made a series of phone calls to several people just to make sure that they knew before it got out there. But I didn't want to, like I said, and I told everybody, it's not a secret. You don't have to keep it a secret. You can be open about it. I'm open about it. but I didn't want to make it like a big thing that I didn't want it to be my social media identity that I have cancer. But I felt like uh, with these live streams, because only people who had been paying attention to the live streams knew that I was having the problem before we knew it was cancer. And so I thought it was only fair to share with you, those who watched my live streams, that yeah, it turned out to be cancer. Here's what's going on. And what's kind of interesting, and like I said, I promise I'm not going to turn this into the Code's Cancer Show, but I'm about to start chemotherapy and radiation next week. And my understanding is that it's going to tear, excuse me, it's going to tear me apart. I'm planning on uh, continuing on with all my activities regardless, including the live stream. So you're probably going to watch me wither away over the next couple of weeks. The good news is that once it's done, they think they're going to be able to knock it out, and then I'll recover and I'll be fine. I'm going to write lots of books and I'm going to have a lot of fun. Hopefully, I'm not going to lose my tongue. One of the solutions was surgery, but that would have been possibly cutting away a lot of my tongue. So they're going to try to knock it out first with chemotherapy and radiation before we have to do that. Before they take away my ability to speak. So it's been rough. I mean, already since the summer, I've been in a lot of pain because of it. It causes my tongue to swell, my gums ache, my jaw aches. Sometimes I lose taste. It's hard to talk. It's hard to eat. I had my first biopsy was I was wide awake with just a little topical anesthetic that did very little to hide the massive pain. So they literally took a needle and shoved it into my mouth and tried to poke around at the tumor to get a sample from it. They realized that wasn't enough, so so the next time they knocked me out and dug in there deep. And I gotta say, like immediately after, like I couldn't swallow. I couldn't even drink water. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to drink water. I have to, by the way, I have to go to a swallow therapist to relearn how to swallow as I go through the radiation. I was on pain medication, including oxycodone, and I remember I could only take that every 6 hours, and the last 2 hours was a lot of agony. But by the end of the 1 week supply that they gave me, I thought I was going to be okay. And then last Thursday, I went off the oxycodone and then woke up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain. That's when I realized that the opioid had really hit a lot, because they did surgery down in there. They went through my mouth. That's why there's no scars. So that was brutal. Laura gave me some of her oxycodone acetaminophen mix. I only took it when I was with her so that I could sleep, so I wouldn't be up moaning while she was sleeping next to me. But I don't use it when I'm alone. I will say in the last couple of days it got a lot better, where I'm pretty much getting by on just over the counter stuff, that's great. So the next thing that happens is that next week, is it next? Yeah, Monday the 3rd, I start chemotherapy, and I have anti-nausea drugs for that. And then I think on Thursday, which is the day after my birthday, my birthday's February 4th, is going to be the beginning of radiation, and then that's it. I'll be doing radiation all the way. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Pulling up my there we go. Okay, so Monday through Friday, so it's just treatment. Those are all radiation, and then every Monday is chemotherapy. And then I think my last one is March 18th. And then hopefully that's beginning the recovery, which is great. That means when the book comes out on April 16th, I should I should have gotten a lot of my strength back. They say I'm going to be at my worst, like maybe the last week of radiation and the first week of recovery. So that's basically it. I'm still working. I have a side job with Apps Global. I'm a field interviewer for the Moved program. It's a program in which they moved underprivileged children into better neighborhoods so they can get a better education, break the cycle of poverty. My job is I go into their homes and I interview the mothers and the children, and I pay them for their time, and I'm paid by the federal government to do it. I'm still doing it. In fact, I did an appointment last night. It's just enough to kind of keep me in my bills. I am applying for financial aid to help me pay for the costs of the treatment. I do have insurance; it's very minimal insurance. That seems to be going fine, and other than that, I'm doing okay. So I'm reading uh, I'm reading a book. Let's see if I can pull it up easily. Um, I'm reading a a modern contemporary military thriller, which I rarely ever do. I like all military things, including uh, contemporary. I'm more interested in historical. I'm more interested in swords. I think my favorite is like swords and black powder. Yeah, I'm reading this book right here, which is Charged to Battle, a World War III techno thriller by Nick Ryan. And this was kind of like my reward book. So I finished reading um, I finished reading Falkenhorst, and I told myself, okay, just as a palate cleanser, I'm going to read this book. I realized it was only $2.99, but I realized it's a novella. Well, it's short novel novella. It's 50,000 words, so it's a very quick read. I'm enjoying it. I wanted something that had mechanized infantry because lately, and I'm never going to write. Well, never say never, but I have no plans on writing mechanized infantry. But I wanted to just escape, take a break from the 19th century, um, take a break from saber charges and horses, and, um, and do a very modern book. So this is an interesting book. What's funny is this is written in, before the just before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so in this book, it's a similar scenario in which Russia um, invades Latvia, uh, the Baltic states, Latvia, put myself, Estonia, and there's another one that starts with an L, and then start pushing into Poland. And so the NATO forces are scrambling to stop them, and the NATO forces have been losing battles. And this is about a striker force. Strikers are those armored personnel carriers. They're not the Bradleys that are tracked. They have six fat tires on either side. They're supposed to be really troop transports. They're not really supposed to be fighting a whole lot in them. But it's like a small number of these vehicles and regiments that use these vehicles are there in Poland, and their job is to kind of hold back or to stall the Russian advance before the rest of NATO can get their um, can get their act together, get out there. So it's fun. I've read the first 10% of it. Like I said, it's reading very fast. It's only 50,000 words, but yeah, I feel like all reading is good, no matter what genre you're writing in. Um, I write historical fiction, but I also write. My books are also considered military fiction or historical military fiction. I still like contemporary. I like space stuff too. I like a little fantasy. So historical military or historical action adventure is probably my favorite place to read and write, and certainly is where I write. But I read outside of the genre too. So I'm very excited about this. I will have um, a review on it. This is part of a series. They're not sequential, so you can read them in any order. But basically, Nick Ryan, who is from Tom Clancy fame. This is one of those weird thing where like an author dies, and then they license his name, and then other writers write under that brand. So there are Tom Clancy novels written by Nick Ryan. So anyway, I'm enjoying this. This to me is a pure pleasure read. Yes, it'll make me a better writer because anytime I expose myself to writing about combat, was good. But the 12-year-old boy in me is enjoying this book a lot. When I get done, I'm planning on reading Nathaniel Green's the first novel of his Northern Wolf series. Nathaniel, this is a guy that I had seen because he's the only other guy writing Michigan Cavalry. There's two of us, and he's done very well. He's done a lot better than I have. And he's moved on to writing fantasy like swords and sorcery kind of stuff. But he it's so funny. He reached out to me at one point, and I didn't realize who he was at first. And he was like, "Hey, I see that you're an author too, and blah blah, blah, and just want to introduce myself." I'm, "Oh, that's great." And then I looked at him, I'm like, "Holy cow, it's this guy!" So, the reason why I want to read his book is one because I like reading my rivals, and my rivals are my friends. By the way, I want all my rivals to succeed. But my contemporaries, I guess, he's writing in the same genre, although he's moved on to a different genre, so we're not really competing that much anymore. But also because my next book is going to go back to the Civil War, and to get my head back in the game. I mean, I don't use novels as research. I use novels to help me get the feel and the color and the texture back in my head. And then I'll use actually there's a great book I used when I wrote the trilogy about the history of Detroit that talks a lot about Detroit at that time. But the interesting thing is that Nathaniel is writing about he writes about the Fourth Cavalry, but Michigan Cavalry. So I thought that would be an interesting book to read as I'm preparing to write my novella, which is not going to have really a whole lot of actual Civil War in it. It's all gonna take place in Detroit. So there's gonna be a little bit of the Underground Railroad, but other than that, Underground Railroad and Detroit. Carl will make an appearance, as will some of the other characters, but the main character is gonna be Chester Newman. That book is gonna be 20 to 40,000 words. Like I said, it's a novella. What's the difference between a novella and novelette? I mean, these are like, gray areas, like the Nick Fury's, not Nick Fury, Nick Ryan's book, Charge to Battle, would be called a novella. If you talk about word count, I would say that like a flash fiction is anywhere between like 300 to like 1,200 words, about the size of a scene in a book. A short story is, I'd say, 1,200 to 5,000 words. And that's about the length of a chapter. The next delineation would be a novelette, and that would just be anything that has multiple chapters in it. I would say novelettes could be like 7,500 words up to maybe 30,000 words, maybe. With gray areas between. So like the next step between a novelette and a novella is a novelette is a little tighter, a little shorter, usually a single story arc. A novella is, I would say, picks up from there from like anywhere between like 20, maybe 30,000 words up to 50,000 words. And then a novel is 50,000 up. Like a short, like short novels. A lot of Louis de l'Amour westerns are, like right around, anywhere between 40 to 60,000 words. Of course, some novels get really big. I think that once you start getting past like 150,000 words, are you really writing a novel, or are you writing something that should be broken up into a series? That's my own personal opinion. I also think that big novels are, well, they make less money, first of all, because um, because first of all, people are daunted by them, so people aren't quite sure if they want to take on a big novel. So I think that the Goldilocks is about 80,000 words. I keep ending up on opposite sides of that. Like the Prussian Prince was 76,000 words. Right now, the French Fiasco is 109,000 words. But anyway, that's the delineation there. So the next thing is going to be the novella, uh, which is called the Underground Railroad Ball, and then we're going to watch. Then we're going to write Black James. Um, that will probably be over 100,000 words, I think. Anyway, I bored you enough. I'll be back next week with an update. I will next time I talk to you, I probably will have had chemotherapy and radiation, so I'll tell you how that went, and I'll let you know where we are with the editing, and the novel I'm reading now is pretty short, 50,000 words. So I'll probably be up with a review of that pretty soon. Okay. So anyway, like I said, every single time, I love you guys. Keep writing, keep reading. There's an author out there you like. Make sure you give them a 5-star review on Amazon and Goodreads or where else you can, or however many stars you think they deserve. And also, get on the pre-order for the Kindle version of the French Fiasco. It's only $1 until it comes out. Then it'll be $4.99, and those prices are the same. The relative price, whether you're buying in India or the UK or Mexico, whatever, it's only $1 and whatever that is in your currency, and it'll be $4.99 whatever it is your currency. Join my email list. I will be updating when things come out there, and plus everybody on my email list will eventually get a free novella. And that's it. I love you guys, and I will talk to you. Hopefully, I will do this again next week. Okay.